Hey, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about the fight between George St-Pierre and Michael Bisping at UFC 217. We're going to talk to John Danaher, who is St-Pierre's trainer, and Jason Parillo, who is Bisping's trainer, and they're going to provide information on this fight that we've never heard before. Now, at around the time of the fight, there were some rumors that St-Pierre was having a hard training camp, but there wasn't much other information available. When we did our documentary on St-Pierre for MMA True Fan, which is available now on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all major apps, we spoke to Danaher for it, and he shared some information on this fight in the training camp that was really scary, and some of these details are quite graphic. Here he is talking about it.
When the Bisping camp was on, George had no idea what was happening to him. All he knew is that he was just couldn't eat, would have to go to the bathroom at times that made no sense, and there was blood everywhere. You know, your first thought when you see this thing, do I have fucking stomach cancer? That's the first thing you're thinking about. And, there were genuine concerns, and he had to go to a fight camp with all of this, and he did every kind of testing, and thankfully the worst case scenarios were quickly removed as possibilities. And then it came down to, okay, you've got ulcerative colitis. Now, he was trying to gain weight to go up to 185 pounds, so every time he ate, it was torture. His stomach was tearing him up inside. He would have to go to the bathroom and lose the weight he had worked so hard to gain. It was just a disaster.
So the training camp was pretty much a nightmare for everybody. And you'd think maybe on the day of the fight that St-Pierre would be okay, maybe he'd be better, maybe he'd get it all together at the end, but that wasn't the case at all, as Danaher talks about here.
And then the very day of the fight, I remember everyone tends to wake up very late on the day of the fight, because obviously George doesn't fight until around midnight, so most people wake up pretty late. I remember, by my habit, tend to wake up rather early, and so does Freddie Roach. And Freddie Roach and I were talking. I saw George come out and go to the bathroom, and he didn't come out until 3 hours later. And I went over to him and said, is everything okay? And he just looked at me with a stoic look. He said, I'm fine, feel great. But of course, obviously he wasn't. And then went out and fought one of the greatest fights of his career against a very, very tough and dangerous opponent. And it was only after the fight that he told us the extent of the physical problems he was having. He kept it to himself through the entire camp. He was worried that if he told us the extent of the problem, that we would lose confidence in his ability to fight, and he didn't want that.
When we spoke to Jason Parillo about Bisping's training camp, he shared some of the strategies that they're putting in place when creating their game plan for the fight. Here's Parillo talking about it.
Just moving, using Bisping's got much better footwork, and we believed his boxing and kickboxing was better than George's. So, just stay on angles and just keep breaking them down and let them, just draw them out to the fight and just stay ahead of them.
St-Pierre faced some serious adversity at the beginning of this fight, with Bisping imposing a lot of damage. Here's Parillo talking about it.
When George was able to get the takedown, I thought that's where Michael actually even was most effective, because when Michael was on his back, he was right there for him, and he was dropping elbows, and he split. George's face was split open. George came walking right up to me. As soon as the fight was over, walked beeline straight to me, and said some very nice things to me. But at the same time, I'm looking at his face. His nose is split open. His head split open. Those were from the elbows he was taking from when he was on his back. I think George was used to being the much bigger guy when he has a guy underneath him. And all of a sudden he found out he's on a guy that's much bigger than him while he's on top of him, and he was taking some damage from it.
This was one of the few fights where it looked like St-Pierre was really in trouble at the beginning, and it set up one of the great comebacks in his career.
George is smart, and George did his homework, and George knew that Bisping was blind in that right eye. He knew it, his corners knew it, they all knew it, and that's what a gentleman George is, actually. At the end of the fight, he even, as Joe Rogan's interview, admitted that, and that's what to me, that's what I like about George. George is an honest motherfucker. He just we knew that Michael had a deficiency or whatever, however he said it, and that's why he was looking for his left hook of his own.
John Danaher continued by talking about how this fight in particular was such a special win for St-Pierre, and he explains why.
There was something nothing less than heroic about George's last fight. You know, he was this lonely fight against his own body to get ready for one of the toughest opponents he went out and faced, and then to win in such a spectacular fashion. It was truly one of his great performances. People always talk about saving the best till last, but I think George definitely did that in that fight.
Danaher continued by talking about how this fight in particular went a long way in dispelling some of the gripes and grievances that some fans had about St-Pierre. Here he is talking about it.
You know, there were always two big criticisms of George's career. He never went up a weight division to fight, and he was a boring fighter. He was a tactical genius, but a boring fighter to watch. And in his last fight, he disproved both of those criticisms. He went up a weight division, took on the champion, and won. And not only did he won in a thrilling fashion. He finished the fight. There was drama in the fight. George got cut and had to come back and use the combination of a beautiful left hook followed by very strong grapple boxing on the floor to get a beautiful submission victory.
We'd heard details in the past about St-Pierre having a tough training camp, but we'd never heard anything like this before, with him having a cancer scare, him not being able to train, him having ulcerative colitis and not being able to put on the weight. And it makes sense now why he didn't stay at 185 to fight Robert Whittaker, because he can't maintain that weight due to his condition. It also makes sense why he wanted to drop down to 155 or a catch weight to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, because dropping weight is easier for him than it is to maintain at 185. That's all for today. If you want to hear the documentary on St-Pierre, you can find it at Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or any major podcast app. You can also find MMA True Fan on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MMA True Fan. You can find other documentaries there as well as videos just like this. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy the documentaries, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.